going on, folks? It is not Friday. It is Thursday, October 31st, 2019. It is Halloween night here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but it is not trick-or-treat night. Our county has actually postponed that to Saturday because of the rather awful weather. Like, literally no joke. From the time that I arrived at work on Wednesday around 1:30 p.m. until the current time of this recording, which is around 5:30ish, it has not stopped raining. It just absolutely brutal weather. And it does not look like it is going to be stopping anytime soon. That's not a problem, because it did not stop me from keeping up with my professional wrestling recaps for the week. And that is what I am here to bring you all today. This is the Five Starr Wrestling Report review series, the YouTube channel dedicated to bringing you wrestling news, recaps, and opinions on anything regarding WWE, AEW, New Japan, ROH, Impact. Wherever the major news cycles and events are coming from, I am here to bring it to you. If you are checking out the show for the first time, awesome sauce, welcome aboard. And make sure you click that subscribe button there and keep yourselves up to date with all future FSWR content here. I have 2 uploads every week on this channel, including a Monday news cycle report and our Friday installment that includes recaps of NWA Powerrr, AEW Dynamite, and NXT TV. It's always fun to do, and I always like giving my somewhat outdated and grumpy, cynical opinions of modern pro wrestling. Don't take anything I say too legitimately. I would classify myself as a mark that watches wrestling and complains about it on the internet. Practically no different from what everyone else does these days. Anyway, got a lot to get into in this video, so let's just dive right into the recaps. Starting off, of course, with my favorite program of the 3, NWA Powerrr. This is also episode 4 in the cycle of NWA Powerrr episodes on YouTube. We begin with Jim Cornette and Joe Galli trying to run down the card for the night. Pretty soon, James Storm comes out to do a promo. Says he's tired of having to prove himself to everyone. Says he wants to know why Nick Aldis is down his throat. This brings out Colt to confront him. Basically he says that there's a reason that he lost the National Heavyweight Title, and the reason is that he had a bummed leg and that he wasn't at 100%, which maybe he was. I never saw the initial match, so I would not know. What I do know is that it's never a good look for your babyface to make excuses for why they lose their matches. Anyway, out comes Eli Drake, who seems to have taken the role of being NWA's voice of reason lately. Anyway, he believes that Aldis truly is ducking Storm, intentionally not giving him a title shot. This eventually brings out Aldis. He makes an alcohol joke directed towards James Storm, and he lays out the big challenge for the night. He wants a 6-man tag with Team Aldis versus Team Storm. If Aldis' team wins, then Colt Cabana gets a shot at the National Heavyweight Championship, and if Storm's team wins, then Storm gets a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship, with another added stipulation that Storm has to vacate the national title in order to get it. Which, even Jim Cornette's response is like, wait, what? It's not fair. But Aldis rationalizes it, which I did appreciate. He says that if Storm wants to be at the top of the mountain as the world's champ, then he has to be willing to sacrifice it all in order to get it. So Storm agrees, and he tells Aldis to go check on his Jaguar in the parking lot because Storm may or may not have backed into it with his 4x4. All in all, it's a good opening segment. It was very reminiscent of what you would see on a typical Raw from back in the day, where they'd have each guy involved come out to talk in very choreographed segments, usually all designed to set up some kind of big tag match or multi-man match later on. And this kind of felt like that by the end, but the promos were fine and everything at least sounded genuine, so overall it was fine. Trevor Murdoch was out for a promo. He talked about having to work for everything in the wrestling business. Says he's here to earn a contract. He said he called NWA management and said not to suspend Josephus for 45 days for throwing powder into Colt's eyes, but rather book him in a match with Trevor for the show. Okay, it's quite odd storyline continuity. And while it was a fine promo, the one thing that I could not help but be distracted by was the giant red handprint on Trevor's chest during this promo. Looked brutal. Maybe you should check that out. Anyway, this eventually brought out Josephus, and long story short, I watched this promo back like 3 times to try and make out any dialogue, and the only thing that I could recall after hearing it back several times was the following quote, and no, I am not making this up. My spiritual advisor has sanctioned all sorts of violence upon Murdoch Trevor. I'm not going to say that this was as cringeworthy as Beth Phoenix informing us that Jackson Riker likes to refer to his offense as a vulgar display of savagery or whatever it was, but this was still very bad verbiage. Although I will say that it was at least funny to hear that after Josephus says this line, it is met with complete silence from the crowd, with one exception where a fan just blurts out, "Yeah!" Now that I found hilarious. So anyway, this leads into Trevor Murdoch versus Josephus, and I guess my best way to describe this match is, have you ever opened up a pack of Jell-O or vanilla pudding, and you just kind of, watch the surface of it bounce around? That is what it was like watching Trevor Murdoch versus Josephus. I mean, I get that not every wrestler needs to have a great physique, especially in today's business, but come on, Jim. If you're going to call out guys like Chuck Taylor and Joey Janela for having crappy bodies, which they do, then what do you call Trevor Murdoch and Josephus? Anyway, the match went like a minute. Josephus jumped in before the bell. They did some slow and awkward-looking stuff for a bit. Josephus dropped Trevor on his face in the corner turnbuckle. He went to grab the white powder from a snack bag in his trunks, but Trevor kicked the powder back in his face and hit a top rope bulldog for the pin. And I presume that Trevor Murdoch now has a contract with NWA. Is that really all it takes? Just beat Josephus in a wrestling match and we'll send you your first paycheck. Perhaps there's a steeper slope to climb than that. They aired the seizure-inducing Thunder Rosa promo again. Again, highly recommend don't watch this if you cannot handle spasm-like flash images. This was followed by an Aron Stevens promo. Joe Galley asks when Aron will wrestle. Aron revisits the idea that there are stars and supporting casts in the business. This brings out Ricky Starks for a confrontation. He extends his palm to Aron for a kiss. This is met with awkwardness and chants of "this is gay" from the crowd. Aron says that Ricky looks ridiculous, and then Ricky slaps Aron in the face, which Aron was taken so aback by. He is either a very, very good actor, or he was completely caught off guard by this and was not expecting this slap coming. Either way, I am on board with what the crowd reacted to with this. While I would not affirm that this was gay, it was very awkward and did not work at all for me. We had an instant commercial for an Austin Idol-inspired product called Kayfabe Cocktail, and all that I can say about this was that it was far and away better than that commercial they aired last week with the invisible hair cream. Although the message seemed to convey something of, hey, if you're trying to get it on with that girl next door, get her really drunk off of this cocktail, and then go to town on her when she's intoxicated and unable to consent. And if it turns out to be the case, NWA is going to have a pretty big lawsuit on their hands. Anyway, they did have a great line at the end where Idol goes, "I tell you what's in it, but that would not be kayfabe, would it? The Dawsons versus Eddie Kingston and Homicide in a no DQ tag match. They had what I can merely best describe as a very boring hardcore brawl. They did some fighting on the outside for a while. Eventually, one of the Dawson brothers went to the back to grab a bunch of chairs. We then had a great installment of Dawson Brother versus the Steel Chair, wherein the dude could not toss the chair in the ring to save his life. There was a double suplex spot to Eddie onto the stacked up chairs. They ended up beating down Homicide and burying him underneath the chairs. And then in a very confusing finish that neither myself nor the announcers could explain, the long-haired Dawson goes up top, but he gets cut off by Thomas Latimer, the former Bram. Eddie then clubs the bald Dawson in the face, but then Royce Isaacs gives Eddie a DVD onto the chairs and throws the bald Dawson on top of him for the pin. I have no idea what they were going for with this finish. All we know is that we are told there's a plan. And if this were WWE, I would tell them to go piss off, but NWA is on good terms with me, so I will at least give them a chance to explain this over time. We had a promo package for a character named The Question Mark. I thought Cornette refused to work under the same roof as Vince Russo. Anyway, they aired a Marty Bell promo. She talked about Allison Kay being her best friend, but that she wants to prove herself in the NWA to become the women's champion. She was also wearing an Allison Kay t-shirt here. So I guess her character is that she's a fangirl without being the psycho stalker Mickie James fangirl. Interesting. And that led into Marty Bell versus Ashley Vox. Allison came out before the bell and insincerely wished both girls luck, basically. The match was not very good, if we're being honest. You could tell that Cornette has virtually nothing to say about any of the women's matches. He spent half the match talking about Aron Stevens' D-list movie. And when he did call the action here, there was absolutely no life to it. Ashley looks like she can actually do some cool stuff. Marty's still very green. Probably the nicest way I can put it. There is a spot in this match where Ashley puts Marty in a fishhook cross-faced chicken wing, to which Jim responds by saying, "That can't be legal." So apparently this was aired before Jim saw any of Britt Baker's matches. Anyway, Ashley Vox ended up getting the win with a jackknife pin. And then in one of the rather peculiar debuts that I have seen this year in any pro wrestling company, Thunder Rosa comes down to shake Marty's hand. They play the very dramatic drum roll ambiance music, and then Marty just leaves. What? I don't get it. They aired the Tony Falk Waffles and Tire Irons commercial again, and suffice it to say, it was funnier the first time I saw it. Second time around, not so much. Although they did have the special extension at the end of this week, where for 1 week only, if you buy 3 gluten-free waffles, you get 4 tire irons free. It's better than Rite Aid sales. I'll give it that. Ricky Starks versus Aron Stevens. Pretty standard match. Ricky took control early on. Aron ended up pulling Ricky into the ropes and kicking them into his groin for the heat. They did a few more things for a while, and in the finish to the match, Ricky teases a slap to Aron, but Aron screams and cowers, turns his back. Ricky pushes him into the ropes and gets the O'Connor roll for the pin. And then after the match, Aron and the fans go back and forth with no yes chants. And they were not the Daniel Bryan no yes chants. It was more of a watered-down 2019 version of it. It was kind of odd to see Aron lose his first match in AEW. I mean, I guess with the gimmick he has, it works. You know, the idea that he's so focused on being a D-list actor, he completely forgets the fact that he's supposed to be a pro wrestler. I know a lot of modern fans that look at that and call bull crap on it, saying, well, if he doesn't want to wrestle, why doesn't he just leave the business? And, I kind of get that. I won't deny this, however. Aron's a very talented performer, and he's actually been the highlight of most of these shows for me. This week was definitely not a home run for the Aron skits, but he does make the show instantly more entertaining every time he's on it. So, good for him. And in the main event, James Storm and the Wild Cards versus Nick Aldis, Colt Cabana, and Mr. Anderson. We had a Magnus versus Bram encounter early on. There's a nostalgia trip for the decade. Match was pretty much every six-man you've ever seen before. Faces ran wild early on. Heels cut off Colt for the heat for a while. Anderson gets a hot tag and runs wild at the end. It ends up breaking down into the archetypal everybody hits a signature move on the other, but then immediately gets taken out by the other dude. And in the finish to the match, Colt gets the Superman pin on, I think it was Latimer, so that presumably sets up Cabana versus Storm, probably where Cabana would win back the NWA national title so that Storm could go after the world title. Still temporarily leaves Aldis without an opponent for the time being, but it was good plot progression. Match was funny too, because aside from the brief moment at the beginning where Aldis wrestled Latimer, I do not think he tagged in for the remainder of the match. So, when you look at this match on the surface, it was a genius plan that came together on behalf of the world's champion here, because Aldis takes out his biggest threat as a top title contender right now, and he did not have to do jack squat in the six-man to get it. There's a concept you don't see a lot of in pro wrestling today. Smart baby faces. So that was NWA Powerrr. Overall, I'd say the show was fine this week. Matches are pretty good. Story progression is always excellent on this show. I love the promos. I just cannot get over how refreshing it is to see guys just talk and make it sound real. They don't sound scripted. It's just guys going out there, saying their piece in like 5 minutes or less, and then just moving on with the rest of the show. And you know what the best part is? People get amped up for it. Especially after last week's NXT show where I saw 3 consecutive inset promos where dudes were blatantly reading dialogue off of teleprompters. This method is better, let's just say that. Better than last week's show? I don't think so. Still my favorite show out of the bunch that I'm currently watching? Oh, absolutely. And that brings us to AEW Dynamite from October 30th, 2019. The show begins with Tony Schiavone meeting with Cody and Dustin at the Charlotte airport. They then cut to showing highlights from last week's show, including the fallout to what happened when the show went off air. They aired Hangman Page running out and chasing off Pac and getting on the mic to set up their match at Full Gear. By the way, isn't it ironic that the one time that AEW makes the decision to give Hangman Page some promo time, they wait until after the show goes off air to do it? God, they must have little faith in this guy's talking ability. And then they had a rather strange skit with Jon Moxley going into Tony Khan's office to complain about the time limit draw in his match with Pac from last week. Basically, they film the door so that we do not see the interaction between the two, but we hear them talking, and the audio quality that is presented is to make it seem like they were standing right in front of the camera when they were doing this. So it was very artificial sounding. Also, I guess Tony Khan's gimmick in AEW is that he is Vince Russo during his initial run in WCW, where his character was a disembodied voice, but we never actually saw his face for the first few months he worked there. Anyway, somehow this conversation leads from Moxley talking about the time limit deal to all of a sudden Tony is booking the stipulation for the Moxley Omega match at the pay-per-view to be a lights-out match. And I have no idea what that means. I'm assuming it is some kind of modified version of a Falls Count Anywhere / Street Fight deal. I don't know, the announcers never explained it. The other thing that I did not like about this was that they made the announcement that the Omega Moxley match of the pay-per-view is not going to count toward either guy's win-loss record, simply based on the rationale that it is now an unsanctioned match. And this is stupid because you are trying to establish a niche in your company that wins and losses matter. And we're in week 4, week 5, whatever it is, of this Wednesday Night War deal. And you are already booking matches and stipulations that do not count for wins and losses. I'm also pretty sure they already did this deal with an AEW Dark match with Kenny Omega recently, where the match was unsanctioned, so it did not count towards his record. It was a Joey Janela match, right? So, I'm not really getting the point of this. Why are we supposed to care about wins and losses when you're basically telling us that they do not matter in particular circumstances? It's just really counterproductive booking to me. Sammy Guevara versus Hangman Adam Page. I love this match. And you want to know why I love this match? Because Hangman Page and Sammy Guevara went out there and they just had a basic professional wrestling match. They didn't do a bunch of overly choreographed high spots. They didn't have to kill their bodies in order to get over. They just had Hangman Page go out there and work as the crowd-favored babyface. They had Guevara work as the slimy, cocky heel. Page looked great and smooth with everything he did. They let Guevara get a little bit of heat in there. They had this great spot toward the end where Guevara goes up top and teases some kind of top rope dive. And instead he just jumps down and gives Page a big paintbrush slap to the face. You know, because Guevara's actually trying to be a heel in modern pro wrestling. Go figure. Page gets up and goes to town on Guevara. Makes a big fiery comeback, teases the buckshot lariat, but Guevara scouts it and tries to cower behind the ref to cover up. And then eventually Guevara launches Page onto the apron, tries to spring off the ropes, but Page leaps over, hits the buckshot lariat, and gets the 3 count. Like I said, awesome match. And Page gets on the mic afterwards and says that at Full Gear, he's going to do some real cowboy crap and he's going to take Pac's head off. And as JR perfectly noted on commentary, short, concise, and effective. And he also noted that the Hangman Page cowboy bleep thing is going to be a t-shirt. Kids, if you watch the show, don't wear that to school. Aside from that, I have absolutely nothing to complain about this opening match. It was well done. What wasn't well done was this next match. Shauna versus Hikaru Shida. I've seen a lot of Shauna's work over the years. She's actually a very talented wrestler. I saw a match with her and Kaylee Ray from years back. I thought it was a damn good match. And no, I don't mean Kylie Ray, the one that left AEW abruptly. I'm talking about the one that's in NXT UK right now. Anyway, the girls went out there and they tried to have a good match. They worked hard. They did every false finish in the book so that the fans would naively start a "This is awesome" chant. Of course they did. It wasn't a bad match or anything. In terms of matches that I've seen from the women in AEW so far, this is probably one of the better ones, if I'm being honest. Isn't it funny how it ends up coming from a girl that they've barely featured at all since she signed, and a girl that I don't even know if she's signed at all? Like I said, they tried, but the crowd was dead for like 80% of it. They went way too long. There was no definitive face or heel. I thought Shida was supposed to be the heel when she brought out the chair from under the ring and used it to leap off onto a knee Shane in the face, but then of course 3 seconds later she's smiling and high-fiving fans, so it was clear they had no real game plan going into this. The last few minutes did pick up and the fans got into it once they did all the false finishes, but in terms of any plot progression or anything, it really didn't do a whole lot. It was just sort of a reminder that AEW has a women's division that doesn't just involve Britt Baker or Riho. Afterwards, they aired this bizarre video promo with Brandy Rhodes. She's in a dark room with skulls and pictures of some of the female talent on the dresser. And dispersed throughout the video are flash images of Awesome Kong, as well as Brandy screaming and, I guess, performing witchcraft. Perhaps a science experiment for the birth of Kong. I have no idea what the hell they were going for. From what I can gather, it's either Brandy's gimmick is that she's Frankenstein with Awesome Kong as the monster, or Brandy is trying to be the Ministry of Darkness Undertaker from 1999. Either way, it's unusual. Let's just put it that way. Chris Van Vliet had an interview with the Rock and Roll Express, and it did not take too long into the interview when LAX came out and jumped Ricky and Robert from behind. They beat them around the stage for a bit. Santana whipped them around with a loaded sock. And then they did the deal where they gave Ricky a double powerbomb through the staging area. And then the Bucks came out and ran them off. It was a good heat angle. Would I have done this for the first appearance of the Rock and Roll Express on television? No. I would have probably waited a few weeks so that Ricky and Robert could get themselves acquainted with the AEW fans before I started doing big heat angles, but it was effective for what they were going for. We then cut to the ring for a supposed six-man tag, only to then immediately cut to an inset of Tony Schiavone and Cody having a conversation in their limo on the way to the arena. And, they just talked. Tony told some stories about working with Dusty Rhodes back in the 80s. They talked about Dusty's idea of always making the fans wait to bring out the big star. Very subtle plug to put yourself over, Cody. Anyway, Cody talked about his family coming to watch him wrestle at the pay-per-view. Tony gives him a couple final endorsements. And, the dialogue was fine. And they just had a back-and-forth conversation, like literally nothing out of the ordinary from what you would see or hear with normal people in day-to-day life. I will admit, this went on far too long. And I know this because I could audibly hear the crowd chanting, "This is awkward," and chanting for Jim Ross. So maybe there were good intentions with this. All I know is that they talked for like 3 or 4 minutes, ate up a lot of screen time, and with what they already had planned for the rest of the show, I do not think this needed to air. Or at least if it was going to air, they should have shaved it down to like 2 minutes tops. Anyway, we did get John Silver, Alex Reynolds, and QT Marshall versus the Best Friends and Orange Cassidy. This is the match where they did their cross-promotion with the Rick and Morty show, a show that I've seen a handful of episodes with college friends. It's a crappy show. Anyway, Chuck, Trent, and Cassidy were dressed up in the Rick and Morty attire for this one, to which I noted, at this point, I would much rather see Chuck wrestle with something like this instead of watching him wrestle with no shirt every week. Just saying. They had a match. It was a match. JR and Excalibur spent a lot of it joking about QT's receding hairline, which I do not recall him having when he worked for ROH a few years ago. Cassidy did the shin-kicking shtick with Marshall toward the end, ended up doing the suicide dive deal with his hands in his pockets, and then Trent and Chucky hit a belly-to-back / foot stomp combo for the 3 on, I think it was Reynolds, doesn't matter. It was a dumb comedy match. Crowd liked it. They dig Orange Cassidy. They popped for the hug spot at the end. So, everything they did worked. I didn't like it. I thought it was lame and unproductive for anything involving their pay-per-view hype. I mean, the way I look at it, this is what your AEW Dark show should be good for. If you want to do matches like this, book them on that program. Don't sit there and do stupid matches like this, especially when it's not building toward anything toward the pay-per-view. I mean, factually speaking, I will not say that this did not work and that it had no business being on TV, because obviously the crowd was going to eat it up. I mean, it's the AEW fan base. They're doing everything they can to get this product over, even if it means chanting for stuff that really has no business getting over on paper. I mean, so the match was always going to work for them. I'm just saying comedy matches in small doses can work, but I do not think that this is the right show or the right program to do it on. Next week on AEW Dark, sure, perfect. But 2 weeks out from your pay-per-view, doing this on TNT, didn't sit well with me. Up next, we had the Chris Jericho Cody contract signing. Tony did the early hard sell for the title match for Sunday, sounding like he swallowed a box of thumbtacks right before he came out. Jericho is out there being the greatest jag-off heel you can ever find in the business today. Cody's out there being the best babyface imaginable. He's getting a big ovation from everyone. So they sign the contract. Jericho teases he's going to jump Cody, but tells him to relax. He insults the fans, says he's going to sign the paperwork and teach Cody a lesson at the pay-per-view. Says that they are professionals and that they're going to handle their business like men. By the way, I love how after Jericho refers to the crowd as entitled millennial jackasses, he then refers to them as hillbillies. And that right there, that is too much for JR to handle. He hears the term millennial jackass, he does not bat an eyelash. But as soon as he hears the term hillbilly come out of Jericho's mouth, that sparks a reaction out of JR. And the best part of Jericho's line regarding him and Cody being two gentlemen trying to have a conversation. Meanwhile, Jericho stands there wearing a purple pumpkin blazer, looking like the biggest buffoon in the world. God, Jericho's awesome. Have I ever mentioned that, people? He's awesome. Anyway, Cody and Jericho do the big intense handshake. Jericho tells him that they could stand there the rest of the night, but Cody has other problems to worry about. And then they cut to the big screen and they show the Inner Circle beating up Dustin in the parking lot. Jake Hager slams Dustin into the limo and bashes his arm into the door. Eventually all the baby faces run out and chase the heels off. Jericho's standing by his limo lighting a cigar up. Again, because Jericho is the best heel in the business today. I love this skit. I would not say that I enjoyed it as much as the Skybox thing they did last week, but as far as notable highlights of the show, this is right up there. They have done such a great job building up this title program. And while I do not think there's a single person in the world that believes Cody is actually winning the title next weekend, they've really built him up as a credible challenger. So this is awesome. Kip Sabian, Jack Evans, and Angelico versus Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. This was the quintessential everyone did stuff match. We had more Halloween-inspired themes going on here. Guys did a bunch of cool moves. Crowd was into everything. We had our weekly installment of JR complaining that the ref needs to enforce the rules of tag matches by only letting two guys in the ring at the same time, which was not addressed at all this week by officials, just saying that. And in the finish to this match, the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega super kick Jack Evans. Omega gets the V-trigger and one-winged angel on Evans for the pin. And then after the match, LAX jump the Bucks in the crowd and leave them laying. Meanwhile, Kenny Omega has to pretend like he could not blatantly see that the attack was happening from like 5 feet away. I will say that it was at least effective in the sense of pay-per-view hype, so it had that going for it. We had the Peter Avalon and Leva Bates deal where they came out to do a promo. Just a cheap heat promo for a minute. Moxley ended up coming out and laying out Peter with the Death Rider. And then he proceeds to cut a fantastic promo, bearing the fact that AEW management doesn't want to sanction his match with Kenny at the pay-per-view. He buries the concept of AEW's win-loss record, says management can stick it, which, judging how they have been booking the win-loss record thing lately, I was okay with. And then he says that management should know that if they do not want to sanction the match at the pay-per-view, it's fine, but the blood of Kenny is going to be on their hands. And this is the exact promo that I have been waiting to hear out of Moxley since he debuted. He was passionate, he was fired up, he looked like he actually wanted to be there for a change. This was great. And in the main event, Lucha Brothers versus SoCal Uncensored for the AEW Tag Team Championships. They had about 15 minutes left in the program by this point, so they were pretty pressed for time. Neither team got their entrances shown. There was no big presentation or high-profile intros before the match, no fanfare. They just had a match. They went a million miles an hour. Phoenix and Pentagon did all their usual high-risk stuff, although compared to last week, it was a lot more conservative. Lucha Bros worked over Kaz and Scorpio through a commercial. They came back and the faces made a comeback. Pentagon gave Kaz a powerbomb to the timekeeper's table on the outside. They isolated Scorpio for a minute in the ring, and then as Phoenix tried to go up top, Kaz cut him off. Scorpio rolled up Pentagon for a small package and got the pin. And, I don't know. Something about this just felt off. It didn't feel as impactful as it should have. The match really wasn't all that good, and the finish kind of fell flat. I'm glad Kaz and Scorpio won. I mean, they were my initial picks to win the whole tournament before I had second thoughts, thinking it probably would have been wiser to go with the Young Bucks just for historical purposes, I guess. But, once Nick and Matt were gone, I pretty much figured that Kaz and Scorpio were going to win the tournament. I mean, they were the only real team with a storyline throughout the whole thing. They've been a very hot act in AEW since they debuted, and I definitely think that this is the right call by going with SoCal to win the belts, so there you go. Not a good match, but the outcome was what I wanted, so it was fine. And that was AEW for the week. Kind of a mixed bag show for me. I thought the Cody Jericho skit, the Moxley promo, and the Hangman Page Guevara match were all well done. Pay-per-view hype I thought was very effective for the most part. Like I said, they'd done a great job with the Cody Jericho program. I mean, those two have been the best part of the show for the last few weeks, and I always look forward to seeing everything they do every week. The six-mans were sort of there and didn't do a whole lot for me. I mean, the ring action was fine, but I guess looking back, I just really didn't see what the purpose was for doing them, other than reminding us that it was Halloween. The women's division continues to disappoint me. I really do not get what they are doing right now with their women's roster. I mean, it's like they got all these women under contract, and a lot of them they just don't use. And with the girls they are using, they're not really building up challengers right now. There doesn't really seem to be any definite direction for any of the characters. So some needs to change in that department, because especially with what they're going up against with NXT right now, it's not looking good for this women's roster in AEW. And if it's not a focal point of their booking committee, I get it, but if you're going to sit there and accentuate the importance of women's wrestling, you got to at least try to present it like it matters. And I really just don't feel like I've gotten that out of any of the women's matches I've seen in AEW so far. And all in all, I do think they should have made a bigger deal out of the main event. I mean, your big selling point for the show was the AEW Tag Team Tournament Finals, and all throughout the night, they did not air one video promo. They did not highlight the tournament at all. They didn't have interviews for either team. They did virtually nothing to hype it up. And especially the fact that they just threw the match cold out there in the main event with no fanfare build-up, it just really fell flat at the end of the day. And if that was going to be the case, they should have just saved this match for the pay-per-view, which, looking back in context now, I don't really know why they couldn't just save it for the pay-per-view anyway, but there you go. Hit and miss show. And then we have NXT from October 30th, 2019. They opened with a live performance from an indie singer named Poppy. They also ran down highlights of last week's show. I liked the performance. I don't get what the point of it was, but it was cool. And this all led to them doing a live performance of Io Shirai's theme as she came out for her opening match. It is Io Shirai versus Candice LeRae. The one thing I'll say that was very unfortunate about it was that they did this live performance for Io's theme. And when she gets in the ring, she's like instantly the biggest babyface in the company. And then immediately after this, Candice comes out to her generic theme music, and the crowd gave her what I can merely refer to as a golf clap. I mean, this would have been perfect if we were intended to cheer for Io, but we're not. We're supposed to cheer for Candice. So, cool idea, but I'm not sure it was the most effective course of action if we're trying to keep character continuity in mind here. Anyway, the match was pretty good for the most part. I would not say it was better than their TakeOver match, but it was still good. There was a point in the match where Mauro Ranallo refers to Io's character change as a definitive descent into darkness, which is a rather poetic way of just saying Io turned heel for shock value. I guess there's like a sort of charm to hearing Mauro's commentary in NXT, especially when he makes all these whimsical remarks. The more and more I hear it, though, the more I wince every time I hear this kind of WWE verbiage. And it might just be due to the fact that it sounds so WWE. I'm really not digging it, if I'm just being frank. Anyway, I like the story connection they included from their previous match, where Candice tried for the top rope neck breaker, but Io countered it this time, and then she tried for the moonsault, but Candice countered it. Those are always good to see, when wrestlers do rematches, but they always find ways to reverse those key moves that they were suffering in previous matches. So what ends up happening is Io brings a chair into the ring. Candice gets a roll-up for a near fall. She hits some kind of modified full Nelson slam, but Io conveniently rolls onto the chair. And then as Candice goes for the springboard moonsault off the ropes, Io moves, and Candice collides with the chair so that Io can pick up the win. So she is now 2-0 against Candice. And this presumably sets up Io versus Rhea in a number one contenders match down the road. And I guess I should note that after the match, Io tried to get the jump on Candice, but Rhea ran down to chase her off. And I will tell you this, if there is one thing that I would not want to be in the midst of, it is a fight with Rhea Ripley, especially involving a steel chair. Like I said, I'm digging what NXT is doing with their women's roster over what AEW is doing right now. At least I feel some kind of character direction with the division, and they're actually building up a title feud with Shayna and Rhea that I actually want to see, so good on them. We had Finn Balor come out to do a promo. He says that 2 months ago, he was told to job to Bray Wyatt just because he put on a mask, and now Finn took off his mask, and he's the hottest thing in the business. Says there's a lot of buzz and opinions on social media regarding Finn's heel turn. Says a lot of the boys in the back should be sitting out with the fans, because the wrestlers have become the biggest marks in the business. And he congratulates Johnny Gargano that he finally got out of the hospital. But if he returns to NXT anytime soon, Balor is going to turn Johnny Wrestling into Johnny Watches Wrestling. Good promo. I mean, it was an absolute fail as a heel promo, but the verbiage was at least good. They had a video promo for Asuka and Kairi Sane. Video promo for Tyler Bate. Shane Thorne versus Bronson Reed. Yes, Shane Thorne is still a thing in NXT. I know, hard to believe, right? It was a good enhancement match. They had one of those old school Japanese style slap exchanges that was pretty cool. They also had 2 instances where I thought that Shane was dead upon impact, both of which happened in succession, by the way. There's a spot where Bronson gives Shane an overhead German with Shane landing right on his head. And they also immediately follow this with Bronson giving Shane the blackout over-the-head pile driver. And with the way they initially shot it, it looked like Bronson spiked Shane right on his head and killed him. And of course they show a replay a few seconds later, and you can clearly see that Shane is tucking his head before he hit the mat. But those are 2 brutal moments. And in the great finish to this match, Shane crushes Bronson on the top rope, goes for the Hurricane Rana, but Reed just throws Shane down on the mat, and he hits a giant Great Frog Splash for the pin. It was a fun match. Shane's a block of wood personality-wise, but he's a great athlete, and Bronson's definitely got something. I mean, I could see them doing some big things with him a couple years down the road in NXT. Until Vince gets a hold of him and jobs him out like 1,500 times on the main roster. Dakota Kai and Tegan Nox versus the Kabuki Warriors for the Women's Tag Team Championships. Just to catch you up to speed right now on the sheer insignificance of these women's tag belts in this company. During the intros to this match, Morrow brings up the fact that Beth challenged for these titles at WrestleMania this year. I watched WrestleMania, everyone. I completely forgot this match ever happened. But then I remembered like a minute later, oh, that's right. That was the match where Sasha got pissed because she found out that she and Bayley were dropping the belts on that show, so she left. And then they went with the Iconics, of all people. Yeah, that match sucked. So, as I correctly predicted from last week, Asuka and Kairi were absolute babyfaces in this match, despite being billed as the villains. I did like that Dakota and Tegan actually had matching gear for this match. At least credit them that. They had a pretty standard tag match in terms of traditional wrestling. Faces controlled the bulk of the action early on. Heels cut Dakota off and worked her over for, what literally felt like 16 months. There was a really strange part in this match where Asuka and Kairi were getting the heat on Dakota by working over her leg, but instead of working over the bad knee with the brace, they worked on the one without the brace. Odd. Think that you would want to work over the knee that she tore her ACL, but whatever. Maybe the agents know better than me. Tegan did get a great hot tag. She made a big fiery comeback. She went for the Shining Wizard on Asuka, but Asuka put her in a leg lock. They all hit each other with a move and all fell to the ground, were laid out for a minute. Dakota got the tag in. She tried to hit Asuka with the GTS, but Kairi took the ref. Asuka spat the green mist into Dakota, and then Kairi went up top and hit the insane elbow for the pin. The finish was really well done. Good heel heat finish, even though the crowd cheered it. The match definitely went too long, especially for this crowd. But they all worked hard. The flow was well done. They had a really hot finish. So, I don't really have anything to complain about. The mist thing is always kind of sketchy in pro wrestling. The fact that it took the ref like 2 minutes after the bell to figure out that Dakota was covered with green paint just made him look like an idiot. But after the match, the horsewomen came down to pick the bones, the baby faces. They beat up Tegan and Dakota for a minute. Shayna tried to have Jessamine and Marina hold down Tegan so that Shayna could stomp her elbow. And this led to Rhea Ripley coming out to, attempt to make the save. But she got thwarted by Bianca and Io. They ended up all getting into a big brawl with the faces and heels. They had the locker room empty out and all the officials come out to break it up. And this all led to William Regal making the announcement for a War Games match with the girls, wherein they still have a 5-on-4 situation with the faces at the numbers disadvantage. So I'm really not sure what they're going to do there, or who they're going to bring in as the final partner. Maybe Beth. Nah, just kidding. But overall, this is a really well done segment. Crowd went ballistic for everything. And I would note that this is an element of Crash TV done right on a wrestling program in 2019. Tyler Bate versus Cameron Grimes. The last match that I saw Tyler Bate wrestle in was the classic UK TakeOver match with Walter over the summer. I have some unfortunate news. This is not as good as that match. Not that any wrestling match will be as good as that for the remainder of the year. They had a very good technical match. They had this excellent spot where Grimes hoisted Bate up onto his shoulders from the back position, and then Bate reversed it into the greatest Hurricane Rana spot you will ever see all year. Everyone got into this in the last few minutes. Bate did a big dive to take out Grimes on the outside, threw Grimes back into the ring, and then he just stops what he's doing and looks over at the crowd, and there's Killian Dane just kind of menacingly standing there doing heavy breathing exercises. And then Tyler gets back in the ring. Grimes immediately hits the double foot stomp and picks up the pin. I was not a particular fan of the way they booked the finish. Never been a fan of the distraction deal in pro wrestling, normally because they just end up making the babyface look like an idiot in the end. And that's kind of how this came across. I think they would have been better served having Killian Dane just do some kind of DQ run-in. At least that way you could have protected Bate here, but it was what it was. Dane jumped Bate after the bell, did a rolling senton onto him into the steps, and then he told Bate to tell Pete Dunne that they have unfinished business. And after this was all said and done, my follow-up notes read, Killian Dane is the exact representation of just another guy on the roster right now. And in our main event, they gave me the match with Undisputed Era versus Keith Lee in some capacity. Unfortunately, they did not take my idea of using Dominik Dijakovic as Keith's partner. Instead, they went with Matt Riddle. Damn it. Not that I don't like the idea of Riddle and Lee as a team, I would just much rather see Lee and Dijak team up. So the match is Bobby Fish and Kyle O'Reilly versus Keith Lee and Matt Riddle. They had a great sequence in the beginning portion of this match where Lee and Riddle just dominated O'Reilly and Fish forever. Lee was throwing them around the ring and hitting them with big tackles. It all looked phenomenal. They ended up cutting off Riddle and working him over. They do the predictable hot tag tease, only for Fish to yank Lee off the apron momentarily. Lee got a hot tag and killed Fish and O'Reilly. Cole and Strong came down to cause a distraction. Lee also killed them. They did some more stuff for a while. Lee ended up barreling Cole into Strong with the pounce. Then back in the ring, Fish and O'Reilly hit the high-low on Riddle for the win. And it was then announced that the winners of this match and still NXT Tag Team Champions, to which I wrote down in my notes, when in the hell did they ever announce that the belts were on the line here? I have no recollection of that happening. And afterwards, Undisputed Era all jumped Riddle and Lee. Tommaso Ciampa came down with his crutch and just destroyed everyone. Lee and Riddle beat up O'Reilly in the ring. Lee gave O'Reilly a press slam onto everyone on the outside. And then Ciampa leans down to the NXT title and tells Goldie that he's going to have to wait because Daddy's going to war. And then he heaves the microphone either into an unknown portal, never to be seen again, or into the crowd where casualties may have occurred. And this presumably sets up the male War Games match with Cole, Strong, Fish, and O'Reilly versus Riddle, Lee, Ciampa, and a fourth guy to be announced. Maybe Dijak. And that should be a lot of fun. This would be the third consecutive year where the Undisputed Era are in the War Games match, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. Just goes to show how long this group's been around. And overall, I really enjoyed NXT. All the stuff with the women I thought was excellently done. The main event was great. The Balor promo was awesome. I mean, even the prelim stuff I thought was pretty good. And just looking back, it was a really good show. And it also helped that the commentary was not as cringy this week. So that'll do it for this one, everyone. Thanks for watching this installment of the FSWR review series. If you liked what you saw and you would like to keep posted in the future, make sure you click that subscribe button and make sure you click the bell icon to keep yourselves up to date with all notifications. Also, make sure you show your support here by giving this video a rating and leaving some of your feedback down below on anything discussed in the video today. It'd be great to hear from you guys. And with that, I'll check back with you all on Monday for the news installment of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report.